Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about the Docker apps in Truenas Scale. Some of the information, or probably at least over half of it, should be applicable to anybody just using Docker on whatever platform. Some of it will be specific to Truenas Scale and some of it will be generic. Anyways, I'm using Electric Eel, latest update that just came out here in early November, 24.10.0.2. So that's the most up-to-date one that I could get. And we're going to take a look at ClamAV, Clam Antivirus for Linux. So that's one of the native apps that you can install in Truenas Scale. And as you can see here, I have it running. And so it's interesting because if you just install the Docker image in Truenas Scale, it technically doesn't really do anything. Okay, it's just sitting there taking resources, doing absolutely nothing. You need to do some steps to make this work, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. So I'm going to click on the edit button here, and we're going to take a look at what I have done to make this run. All right, so all the defaults are here. All this is documented. One thing I'm going to do is I'll take a quick jump over here to the ClamAV website. This is the documentation. From this area here, it has a section that gives you information about Docker, as you can see up here under installing. So if I go to the page that has Docker information, there's a whole bunch of information above on this page, but I want to come down here to controlling the container. So these are various environment variables you can set. And essentially, you'll notice these first number here, they correspond to these checkboxes in Truenas, the native app. So they're just basically setting environment variables, but they put it in a nice user interface here. And that's basically what happens when you have, let's call it, natively supported Docker apps in Truenas Scale. They're just taking the configurable parameters of the app and kind of adding a nice user interface instead of having to go down to additional environment variables to override, reading the documentation for each app, etc. Anyways, how do we get ClamAV to scan files on our Truenas device? I've got a big file system here. It's a network attached storage, of course, like most of us are using Truenas Scale for. And I want to scan them at some interval. So by default, it's not going to do anything. You should know that. So we scroll down here, and again, these are the other environment variables. So all of the environment variables that you can set for the Docker image for ClamAV are here. But one thing you need to know is, how do we scan, how do we tell this Docker image and map it to a path on our Truenas Scale instance to actually scan that? So the first thing you have to do is come down to this section here, ClamAV scan directory storage. So I set this to host path when I configured it as type. See in my other videos where I talk about IX volume versus host path. Up here for the configuration, I have it left as IX volume. I probably could have changed that to host path, but it's so easy to set this up, I didn't do it. Anyways, for the directory storage that I want to scan, I put host path and I just picked MNT/tank. So this is just going to, show the data on your NAS. Okay, so you just pick the path that you want to scan here. And what it's going to do when you start the image, the Docker image, it's going to map this path on your Truenas Scale instance to a directory in ClamAV called /scandir. Okay, so in the context of the Docker image running ClamAV, /scandir is going to map to whatever you put here. So that's good. Now the image technically has access to that folder. So let's just take a look here and see what that looks like. So I'm going to open a shell window, and we're going to jump in here, and I'm going to, okay, this is where we are, and look, there's that scandir folder. Okay, so these are all subfolders under /MNT/tank tank. Okay, so now I can just execute ClamAV with whatever parameters in here. Because I'm in the shell of the Docker container, so this is like its own operating system, it's got ClamAV installed, and it has access to that mount folder, which is mapped to scander. So let's see here. If I go, let's go ClamAV, no, ClamScan, sorry. ClamScan, and then I'm not going to do a /r, I'm just going to go scander, and then I got to pick something that's kind of small. All right, let's try this. Sync things. All right, let's try. So is there any full files in this? Yes, okay. I will scan the docs2 folder. And let's just confirm that it actually scans a few files, finds no viruses. And this is me just manually testing in the Docker image itself to make sure that I have access to my data sets that I want to scan. And then we'll show a real life example in just a minute. Okay, great. It's done its scan, found no infected files. Now we know we can run clam scan in the Docker image, has access to Truenas Scale's datasets. Let's go back here. Now, just because it can do that, when is it going to do it? Well, guess what? You need to set up a cron job. Previously in the Kubernetes version of Truenas Scale, I think they had, maybe in the community version, they had a way that you were able to, in the edit here, you could set up your cron job there, but you can't do it with this native one, at least as of today. So what you need to do is you need to create your own cron job. And there's a way that you can execute commands in a Docker container. Let's, well, first of all, let's take a look at that. So first you need to go into a shell. I'll clear the screen here. You need to connect into your Truenas Scale. I SSH'd into the server. And then you need to execute a command like docker ps. And we've shown this in other videos where I talked about IX volume versus host path and how that works. This gives you a list of all the running Docker containers and what their name is. And we're looking for the one that is ClamScan. So this here is the name of my Clam antivirus Docker image. So I need that name in order to execute a command. And the way that you execute, as we've seen in other videos that I've made, you from the Truenas Scale's command line, you go docker exec the name of the container. Okay, so you're going to execute something in this Docker container and then the command that you want to execute. So just like before, we're going to go clam scan. This time we're going to do recursive, and we're going to pick some kind of a path. Actually, let's just do this without recursive for now and see how that runs. And you'll notice in here, for those of you that know Docker, after the exec part, oftentimes online you'll see a -it, which stands for interactive. You can do it with interactive, and if I had done that right now, you would see some progress happening right now. And the progress you would see would be similar to, I guess, would be like that updating signatures and all that kind of thing. You would see that in there, but because I'm not running in interactive mode, it'll only start outputting files once it starts scanning. So we'll see that in just a minute here. And the reason you do not want the -it, you can use it here in the SSH window, that's fine, but you cannot use these Docker commands with -it in the cron job. Otherwise you will get an error. And we'll see that later. I'll show you what happens. So anyway, we just did a little test here from the Truenas Scale's command prompt. I executed a Docker command in a Docker container. I verified that it all works. And now we're going to wrap that all up by creating, under System, Advanced Settings, under Cron Jobs right here, you can see that I have created this cron job with that command that I executed before. Only this time I'm picking multiple folders that I want to scan, and you just separate each folder with a space. And so this is going to execute scandir plex data, scandir vsoft solutions, and I could go space and add more. So this is going to execute that command, and just like all my other cron jobs, it will give you that kind of audit information about whether it ran successfully or not, just like your standard cron job. So that's pretty cool, because now what we've done is we've configured ClamAV. We've added a mount so that it can scan into our data sets. We've jumped into a Docker shell in ClamAV to make sure that we have access to that mapped folder, which the Docker image looks at scandir, which is mapped to somewhere in our data set. Then we've jumped in to that command prompt in the Docker image to test that we could run clam scan, and we were able to. And then what we did was we jumped into our Truenas Scale SSH window and executed a Docker command to make sure that we could connect to, we know the name of the Docker container. We used Docker PS to get all of the running containers and got the right name. Executed that clam scan to make sure everything's going to work. And then we wrapped it up with a little bow tie by creating a cron job. And that is it. So now we will have ClamAV actually do its job. It will run at whatever interval we specified in the cron job. We will get little reports showing us the status of that. And we're going to just take a quick look here. This is what happens when you execute a Docker command with -IT interactive. It messes up with the TTY device. So this is sort of the kind of thing you're going to see when you actually have that scan executed. I got my email here. I've configured my Truenas Scale to send emails, and it's all good. Hope that helps you guys out to understand how to set up ClamAV in a Docker container, how to override various parameters. There's a lot more documentation in the ClamAV Docker documentation area about how to control it in other ways. If you're not using Truenas Scale, I do recommend you read this because it has lots of information about how to make it run faster, etc. But if you're using Truenas Scale, it's pretty simple. Just the way I showed you there. Map a few things, test out a few commands, and you are good to go. Anyways, hope that helps you guys out. If it did, please click that like button on the video. And if you like what you see on the channel, please subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.